Hello and welcome to a look at R-Type 2 for the Amiga, a game that was released by Activision. Now it will hardly come as a surprise to anyone that R-Type 2 is the sequel to the arcade smash hit R-Type from Iron Corporation. A game that was converted to just about anything and everything it could be converted to, and most conversions were decent to good. As we all know, anything remotely successful usually gets sequels, but in the case of R-Type, that is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, the plot in R-Type 2 is that the Budo Empire, for some bizarre reason, managed to survive the incredible thrashing they took in the first game and are now back for revenge even. So, mankind sends out a modified R9 type starfighter in order to deal with the Budo Empire yet again. For those familiar with the original game, the modified version the modifications is very subtle but quite impactful all the same. The R9 can charge a beam of destructive energy that can be released, and once released it will destroy all normal enemies and quite a few mini-boss type enemies. If you hold down the button further, the blue energy bar will be overridden by an orangey energy bar that, once fully charged, will release a wave shot, which is showcased specifically here. In every other aspect, the craft and the upgrade system is about the same as it was in the original game. The first level, by the way, I should mention, is very similar to the first level of the original game, and I think it is a sort of fan service knockback, throwback, saying, hey, this is R-Type. It's not R-Type, it's the sequel, but it is still R-Type, and even the music of the first level remains the same as it was in the original game. From a graphical point of view, I think it's fairly easy to accept that this is one of the better looking Amiga games made, and while I have no experience with the original arcade, the arcade of R-Type 2 that is, so I don't have any reference point, it is easy to assume that it is fairly close to the arcade in quality, graphical quality. The detail level is very high, and of course the color choices is quite good, or are quite good I should say. I have seen many an arcade conversion where, even though the original arcade has been available as reference, the color choices specifically has been quite doubtful. The sound design and the sound effects are very reminiscent of the first game, with a few added sound effects here and there. That is, again, not necessarily a bad thing, because the sound quality is very high. The different explosion sounds and shot sounds and all that kind of stuff are very satisfying. The music, specifically in the first level, is a slight re-rendition of the first level's music in the original game, and all the music in general is of a very high quality. So I think it is very easy to accept that from a technical point of view, this game has very little wrong with it. Now, the gameplay, of course, is a side-scrolling shoot-'em up, which in and by itself is not necessarily neither unique nor impressive, but it is worth noting that R-Type introduced the concept of the weapon pod, an upgrade you can get which will attach a pod to your craft that you can detach at will, and the pod can be upgraded up to level 3 with various different weapon types. A very powerful frontal laser, a refractive laser, and a side shooting crawling laser kind of thing. The pod is indestructible, and that means, of course, that once it's attached to your craft, assuming that you actually hit stuff with the pod and not your squishy little ship, you are impervious to most smaller enemies and most normal fire. It is mainly beam weapons which will punch through the pod and into your craft's face. That is dangerous while the pod is attached. You can, as I said, attach or detach the pod at will, and while detached, the pod will spit out a certain amount of firepower, and that amount of firepower is completely and utterly irrelevant of which weapon systems you have picked up. It is the rank of the pod that dictates how much firepower it spits out. So you can have a pod behind you or in front of you that can dish out quite a bit of firepower in order to take care of enemies. And of course the fact that it is indestructible means that you can use it to get rid of pesky enemies in certain areas, and knowledge of where to use the pod in what circumstance and in what direction in front of you or behind you is definitely a gameplay mechanic. Now, a problem with a game like this where you have some potentially serious firepower upgrades is often you find yourself in a position that while you're doing fine and dandy with the amount of firepower you have available, once you don't have that firepower anymore, you are basically boned. The Amiga version of R-Type 2 is very, very notorious in that area. The original game was fairly generous with its checkpoints, meaning that you could get usually enough upgrades to scrape by a tough area by having access to the weapon pod and therefore a shield that could protect you. I don't know whether that is unique to the Amiga version or that is also the case of the arcade version, but in this section, as you can see, I'm quite clearly struggling quite badly with. Something like having the pod available would have made life so much easier, because this section specifically is a case of these tadpole-like pods. They need to be destroyed, because if they're not destroyed, they will release a bunch of smaller crafts, which will home in on you, even off screen. So while you have left them behind, you can think yourself safe, only to have something come up behind you and destroy your craft, resetting you to the checkpoint. As I have no experience with the arcade, I have no way of verifying whether it is the case or not, but according to what people are saying, the Amiga version is actually tougher than the arcade, which of course makes no sense because an arcade is meant to swallow your coins. But that aside, there's no denying that R-Type 2 is a great game. The quality of the game is undeniable. If you like side-scrolling shoot 'em ups, it's an amazing game of its kind. The problem with this version, specifically for me at least, is I don't know again whether that's dictated by the arcade original, but personally I would like the pacing to be 10-15% higher perhaps. It feels a bit heavy, not necessarily sluggish, but it feels a bit heavy moving the ship around. The gameplay pacing in general, I would have liked it to be just a touch faster. But the overriding problem is that you have quite a few extremely difficult sections. As you can see, I'm quite clearly struggling with this bit. And while I'm sure that you can, by having enough patience and putting enough effort into it, get past these bits with not relative ease, because there's nothing easy about it, but you can overcome the obstacles, the challenges that this game throws at you. But for me personally, I have to admit, I didn't necessarily feel the desire to put the amount of effort required into it in order to reach that point. I will like the game, but I am not sure I like it that much. It is undeniably a good game, but the difficulty will put a lot of people off, and it has put an awful lot of people off. There is an in-game cheat mode that will make you invincible, but I would not want to make use of such a gimmicky thing in order to be able to complete a game. Hmm. What a shame. On that note, thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time. Bye bye.